The rain had started before dawn, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud that swallowed my borrowed shoes with every step. I could hear the ceremony preparations even from the edge of the village. Drums, laughter, the sharp commands of women arranging flowers and food. The mating ceremony happened once every 5 years, when unmated wolves from neighboring territories gathered under the full moon to find their destined partners. Everyone who had reached maturity was expected to attend. Everyone except me, apparently. "You're not seriously thinking of going." My stepmother's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face arranged in that expression I'd come to know too well, disgust barely masked as concern. Behind her, my stepsisters preened in matching silk dresses the color of fresh cream, their dark hair elaborately braided with tiny white flowers. "The invitation was for the entire household," I said quietly, folding the thin shawl I'd been mending. My hands were shaking. I hated that they shook. "Don't be absurd." She moved closer, and I caught the scent of rosewater and something sharper underneath, irritation maybe, or embarrassment. "Do you want to humiliate this family? Look at yourself." I didn't need to look. I knew what she saw. Pale hair that never held a curl, hanging limp past my shoulders. Eyes too light, almost colorless in certain light. Skin that burned instead of tanned. My father's features, people said, though they never said it as a compliment. He'd been an outsider, a wolf from the northern territories who'd mated my mother and died before I could remember his face. My mother followed him 6 months later, leaving me to be raised by her sister, a woman who'd agreed to take me in, but never quite forgiven the obligation. "The ceremony is for everyone," I repeated, hating how small my voice sounded. The Alpha said unmated wolves should attend. He didn't mean charity cases." She turned to my stepsisters, her voice brightening artificially. "Come, girls. We need to finish your hair. The carriages will be here within the hour." They swept past me in a cloud of perfume and rustling fabric. The younger one, Margot, avoided my eyes. The older, Celeste, smirked. The door slammed, and I was alone in the kitchen with the dying fire and the breakfast dishes they'd left for me to clean. I stood there for a long moment, listening to their footsteps overhead, their bright chatter. My wolf stirred restlessly beneath my skin, a small, quiet presence that had always been more timid than the others. While my stepsisters had shifted for the first time at 13, embracing their wolves with pride and power, mine had emerged late and uncertain, as if apologizing for existing at all. The dishes could wait. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic room I'd occupied since my mother's death. It was small, with a slanted ceiling that dripped during heavy rains, and a single window that looked out over the village. From here, I could see the great hall being decorated, streams of white and silver fabric turning it into something magical. Wolves were already gathering, families laughing, young men strutting, girls linking arms and whispering. In the corner of my room, wrapped in old cloth, was the dress I'd made in secret. Nothing fancy. I didn't have the money for silk or lace. But I'd saved every spare coin from selling herbs at the market, and I'd traded favors with the seamstress's apprentice for fabric in a soft gray blue. It was simple, almost plain, but it was mine, and it was clean. I pulled it out, running my fingers over the careful stitches. My stepmother's words echoed in my head. Too ugly. Charity case. Humiliate the family. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't belong there, among the beautiful wolves with their confident smiles and gleaming fur. Maybe my wolf and I were meant to remain invisible, doing our chores and keeping our heads down and never expecting anything more. But something in my chest ached at the thought. Not heartbreak. I'd felt that enough times to recognize it. This was different. Sharper. Like hunger or thirst, but for something I couldn't name. I wanted to go. I wanted to stand in that hall and feel, just once, like I belonged somewhere, like I mattered. The rain picked up, hammering against the window. I made my decision. I bathed quickly in cold water, braided my hair as best I could, and slipped into the dress. It fit well enough, though it couldn't compete with silk and flowers. I had no jewelry, no cosmetics, no elaborate styling, just myself, plain and pale and shaking with nerves. The carriages had already left by the time I made it downstairs. I'd have to walk. The Great Hall was nearly 3 miles away, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. My thin shoes were already soaked through before I reached the end of our lane. I walked anyway. The roads were crowded with wolves heading to the ceremony, families in fine carriages, groups of young men racing each other on foot, girls giggling beneath shared umbrellas. I kept to the edges, trying not to draw attention. A few people glanced at me, their expressions ranging from pity to confusion. I must have looked pitiful, a sodden girl trudging alone through the mud. By the time I reached the Great Hall, I was shivering. My dress clung to my skin, my hair had come loose from its braid, and my shoes were beyond saving. I stood at the edge of the crowd gathering outside the massive wooden doors, suddenly paralyzed. What was I thinking? I looked like a drowned rat. My stepmother was right. I should go home. But then the doors opened, and music spilled out. Drums and flutes and voices raised in the old ceremonial songs. The crowd surged forward, and I was carried along with them, through the entrance and into warmth and light. The Great Hall was transformed. Hundreds of candles blazed in iron chandeliers, casting golden light over walls draped in white fabric and garlands of night-blooming flowers. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke and the rich food laid out on long tables. Wolves filled every corner, talking, laughing, their eyes bright with excitement and possibility. I slipped along the wall, trying to find a dark corner where I could observe without being seen. My stepmother and stepsisters were near the front, of course, holding court with some of the more prominent families. I made sure to stay far away from them. First time at a ceremony, I jumped. A young woman had appeared beside me, petite, with warm brown skin and kind eyes. She smiled at my startled expression. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. I'm Iris. You look lost." My voice came out as a croak. I cleared my throat. "Just trying to stay out of the way. Wrong strategy." She looped her arm through mine with easy familiarity. "You're supposed to be seen. That's the whole point. Come on, I'll show you around." Before I could protest, she was guiding me deeper into the crowd. I wanted to pull away, to explain that I wasn't like the other girls here with their pretty dresses and confident smiles. But Iris kept up a steady stream of cheerful commentary, pointing out various wolves and sharing gossip in an undertone that made me smile despite my nerves. "That's the visiting pack from Eastridge. See the tall one with the scar? That's their beta. Gorgeous, right? And over there, that's the Miller family. They've been trying to arrange a match for their daughter for 3 ceremonies now, poor thing. Oh, and those wolves by the fireplace, they're from the capital. See their uniforms? Royal Guard." My attention snagged on the group she'd indicated. 6 men in dark uniforms stood apart from the crowd, their posture alert despite their casual arrangement. They looked different from the village wolves, harder, more dangerous. One of them was scanning the room with pale green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Why would the Royal Guard be here?" I asked. Iris's eyes widened. "You really don't know? The Lycan King is coming. He's unmated, apparently, and the council convinced him to attend the ceremony. Everyone's losing their minds about it. If he chooses someone from our territory..." She trailed off, practically glowing with excitement. The Lycan King. I'd heard stories, of course. Everyone had. He'd taken the throne 5 years ago after his father's death, ruling the 5 territories with an iron fist. Some said he was cruel, others said he was just. Nobody said he was kind. And he was coming here, to our small territory's ceremony, to possibly choose a mate. The crowd's energy suddenly made sense. This wasn't just any ceremony. This was a chance for someone to become queen. A horn sounded, long and clear, cutting through the noise. The room fell silent. The massive doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and I felt the power ripple through the room before I saw its source. He entered like a storm-given form. The Lycan King was tall, taller than anyone I'd ever seen, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway. His hair was black as pitch, worn longer than fashion dictated, and his eyes were the color of amber lit from within. He wore no crown, no ornate robes, just dark clothing that emphasized the lean muscle of his frame and the predatory grace of his movements. But there was no mistaking what he was. Power radiated from him like heat, making my wolf whimper and press close to my spine. The crowd parted as he moved through the hall, everyone bowing or curtsying, His expression was unreadable, not cold, exactly, but remote. Like he was carved from stone rather than flesh. He walked past me without a glance, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Gods above," Iris whispered beside me. "He's even more intense in person." The ceremony began. The alpha of our territory gave a welcoming speech, his voice booming over the crowd. I barely heard it. I was too focused on not being noticed, on making myself as small and invisible as possible. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have come. I didn't belong here, in this hall full of beautiful wolves competing for the attention of a king. But then, something strange happened. As the alpha finished his speech and invited the unmated wolves to begin the traditional dance, I felt eyes on me. Not Iris's friendly attention, or my stepmother's potential fury, something heavier, more focused. I looked up slowly, afraid of what I'd find. Across the crowded hall, through dozens of moving bodies and flickering candlelight, the Lycan King was staring directly at me. His amber eyes were fixed on my face with an intensity that stole my breath. He wasn't moving, wasn't smiling, just watching me with an expression I couldn't read, something between recognition and surprise, as if I'd done something unexpected simply by existing. The music swelled, people began to dance, and he started walking toward me through the crowd, his gaze never leaving mine. Panic seized my throat. I took a step back, then another, my spine hitting the cold stone wall. The Lycan King was still moving toward me, cutting through the dancing couples with purpose. Several people noticed, their conversations dying mid-sentence as they turned to watch. My stepmother's face appeared in my peripheral vision, her expression transforming from confusion to horror as she realized who he was approaching. Iris squeezed my arm. "Holy gods, he's coming over here. Do you know him?" I shook my head mutely. I'd never left our territory. I'd never even been to the capital. There was no reason for him to know who I was. No reason for him to single me out from the crowd of eligible wolves. He stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Not just his size, but the sheer presence of him. The air felt heavier, charged with something that made my skin prickle. His scent hit me. Pine and smoke and something wilder, like the forest after a storm. "You're trembling," he said. His voice was deep, quiet enough that only I could hear over the music. Not an accusation, just an observation. "I'm cold," I managed. It wasn't entirely a lie. My dress was still damp, and despite the warmth of the crowded hall, I couldn't stop shivering. His eyes tracked over me, taking in my sodden dress, my ruined shoes, my dripping hair. Something flickered across his face. Not pity, but something close to recognition. Like he understood what it meant to stand in a room full of people and feel utterly alone. "What's your name?" "Sarah." It came out as barely a whisper. "Sarah," he repeated, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. Then, without warning, he reached up and pulled something from inside his coat. A silver mask, delicate and ornate, decorated with swirls that caught the candlelight. "The ceremony requires masks for the unmated. You're missing yours." I stared at it. Everyone else had received masks when they entered. I'd seen them being distributed at the door. Somehow, in my desperate attempt to remain invisible, I'd slipped past that tradition entirely. I wasn't... The words tangled on my tongue. "Take it." He held it out, and when I didn't move, he stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Unless you want to leave?" It was phrased as a question, but something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. That he could see how much I wanted to stay, despite my fear. Despite knowing I didn't belong. My hand shook as I reached for the mask. Our fingers brushed, and a jolt went through me. Something electric and impossible, like lightning contained in skin. His eyes widened slightly. He'd felt it too. Before I could process what had happened, he'd stepped back, his expression once again unreadable. "Enjoy the ceremony, Sarah." Then he was gone, melting back into the crowd, as if the entire encounter had been a dream. I stood frozen, the mask heavy in my hands. Iris was making small, strangled sounds beside me. "Did that just happen?" she hissed. "Did the Lycan King just give you his spare mask?" I don't know. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Maybe he felt sorry for me. Kings don't hand out masks to strangers because they feel sorry for them. She grabbed my shoulders, turning me to face her. Sarah, do you understand what that means? He singled you out, in front of everyone. I did understand, and that's what terrified me. Because across the hall, my stepmother was staring at me with an expression of pure venom, and several other women, the ones in expensive dresses with elaborate hair, were whispering behind their fans, their eyes sharp with jealousy or calculation. Put the mask on, Iris urged. If you don't, you'll insult him. She was right. With shaking hands, I lifted the silver mask and tied it in place. The world narrowed to what I could see through the eye holes, and somehow that made it easier. I could pretend to be someone else, someone who belonged here. The dancing continued, and Iris pulled me into the moving crowd. She was surprisingly skilled at the traditional steps, guiding me through them with patient corrections when I stumbled. The music was hypnotic, drums and flutes weaving together in patterns that seemed to bypass my brain and speak directly to my wolf. I caught glimpses of the king throughout the night. He danced with several women, each one more beautiful than the last, their movements graceful and confident. They smiled up at him, touched his arm, laughed at things he said. He was polite, attentive even, but there was something distant in his manner, like he was performing a role rather than enjoying himself. He hasn't smiled once, Iris observed during a break in the music, not even when Elena Frost practically threw herself at him. Elena Frost was the daughter of our territory's beta, a stunning woman with dark hair and curves that her red dress emphasized. If anyone was going to catch the king's interest, conventional wisdom suggested it would be her. But when the next dance began and partners were changing, the king appeared in front of me again. May I? He extended his hand. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to make an excuse and flee into the night. But something stronger than instinct, something reckless and desperate, made me place my hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip firm without being crushing. He led me into the dance with an ease that suggested extensive training, adjusting his steps to accommodate my far less polished technique. We moved in silence for several measures, the music swirling around us. You're not from the capital, he said finally. No. I've lived here my whole life. In the village? On the outskirts. I hesitated. With my stepmother and stepsisters. Something shifted in his expression. Your parents? Dead. Both of them. A long time ago. The music changed tempo, requiring a turn that brought us closer together. His hand settled on my waist, and I felt that electric sensation again. Stronger this time, racing up my spine like wildfire. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and he sounded like he meant it. Not the empty condolence people usually offered, but genuine understanding. What about you? The question escaped before I could stop it. I mean, your family, also dead. His voice was flat. My father died 5 years ago. My mother when I was young. I'm sorry. Don't be. My father was a bastard. He said it matter-of-factly, without emotion. His death was the best thing that ever happened to the kingdom. I didn't know how to respond to that. We danced in silence for another verse, and I became aware of eyes on us. So many eyes. The whispers had grown louder. I saw my stepmother's face in the crowd, twisted with fury. They're staring, I whispered. Let them. But I'm nobody. I shouldn't be... You shouldn't... You think you're nobody? He tilted his head, studying me with those unsettling amber eyes. Is that what they told you? My throat tightened. I couldn't answer. Listen to me, Sarah. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something intimate and fierce. The fact that you walked here in the rain, alone, despite every reason not to. That tells me you're stronger than most of the wolves in this hall. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The music ended. He released me, stepping back with a small bow. Thank you for the dance. Then he was gone again, claimed by another hopeful woman with a practiced smile. I stood there, breathless and confused. Iris materialized beside me, practically vibrating with excitement. 2 dances. He danced with you twice. Sarah, do you know how many women would kill for that? I didn't want to know. I wanted to disappear, to go home and process what had just happened in the safety of my attic room. But before I could move, a hand clamped down on my arm, hard enough to bruise. My stepmother dragged me into a side corridor, away from the crowd. Her face was mottled with rage. "What did you do?" she hissed. "I didn't. Nothing. I just—" "Don't lie to me. You did something. Some trick, some desperate ploy to catch his attention." Her grip tightened. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The embarrassment you've brought on this family? Dancing with the king looking like that, like some pathetic beggar?" He asked me. My voice was steadier than I expected. "I didn't do anything." He approached me. "Liar!" She raised her hand, and I flinched, bracing for the blow I'd received too many times before. It never came. A growl, low and deadly, echoed through the corridor. My stepmother's hand froze mid-air, her face draining of color. I turned slowly. The Lycan King stood at the corridor entrance. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but his eyes were pure predator, and the air around him crackled with barely contained violence. "Remove your hand from her," he said softly. "Now." My stepmother released me so fast I stumbled. She dropped into a clumsy curtsy, her voice high with false sweetness. "Your Majesty, I was just... My stepdaughter can be so clumsy. I'm not interested in your excuses." He moved forward, and my stepmother actually backed away from him. "What I am interested in is why you were about to strike her." "I wasn't. I would never. Don't insult my intelligence." He looked at me, his expression softening fractionally. "Are you injured?" I shook my head. My arm throbbed where my stepmother had grabbed me, but it wasn't serious. Nothing I hadn't dealt with before. He didn't look convinced. To my stepmother, he said, "If I see you touch her again, if I even hear that you've looked at her wrong, I will personally ensure you regret it." Am I clear? My stepmother nodded frantically, her face blotchy with humiliation. "Good. Now leave." She fled, practically running back to the main hall. I was left alone with the king in the dim corridor, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Thank you," I managed. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He studied me with that intensity that made me feel transparent. "She's done this before, hasn't she? Hurt you?" It wasn't a question. Somehow he already knew. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, and embarrassing tears were prickling behind my eyes. I would not cry. Not here. Not in front of him. He made a sound, something between a sigh and a growl. Then, without warning, he shrugged off his coat and draped it around my shoulders. It was enormous on me, still warm from his body heat and carrying that intoxicating scent of pine and smoke. "You're still cold," he said, "and your dress is ruined. I'll be fine." Stubborn. But he sounded almost amused. "The ceremony will continue for hours. You should eat something. Warm up. I should probably leave." "Why?" "Because I don't belong here. Everyone's staring. My stepmother will make my life hell when I get home. And you..." I gestured helplessly. "You're the king. You can't keep... People will talk. I don't care what people say." He stepped closer, and I realized with a start that he was angry. Not at me, but on my behalf. "Do you want to leave?" "No," I admitted quietly. "But wanting something doesn't mean I should have it." "Who taught you that?" The question caught me off guard. I thought of my stepmother's constant criticisms, my stepsister's casual cruelty, the pitying looks from villagers who saw me as a burden, the countless small rejections that had taught me to expect nothing, to want nothing, to be grateful for scraps. "Everyone," I said finally. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. They were wrong. Before I could respond, voices echoed from the main hall, someone calling for the king. He closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tightening with what looked like frustration. "I have to go back," he said. "Council obligations." "But Sarah..." He waited until I met his eyes. "Stay. Please, at least until the moon ceremony. Can you do that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He studied me for another moment, as if memorizing my face. Then he turned and walked back toward the noise and light, leaving me alone in the corridor with his coat wrapped around my shoulders and more questions than answers burning in my chest. I returned to the main hall wrapped in the king's coat, feeling like I was wearing a target. The whispers followed me like shadows. I found Iris near the refreshment tables, her eyes widening when she saw what I was wearing. "Is that his—" "Don't," I said quickly. "Please. I can't think about it right now." She nodded, squeezing my hand in silent support before pressing a cup of warm cider into my palm. I drank gratefully, letting the spiced liquid chase away some of the cold that had settled deep in my bones. The ceremony continued around us. More dances, more hopeful glances, more women positioning themselves in the king's path. He moved through it all with practiced ease, but I noticed he kept his interactions brief, polite but distant, and every so often his gaze would sweep the room until it found me, as if checking that I was still there. "The moon ceremony starts soon," Iris said. "That's when the traditional veil dance happens. All the unmated women participate. It's supposed to be the most important part." I'd heard of the veil dance but never witnessed it. During the ceremony, unmarked females would don ceremonial veils and dance beneath the full moon. According to tradition, a male who was drawn to a particular female would approach and lift her veil. If the connection was genuine, if they were truly compatible, both wolves would feel it the moment the veil was removed. It was old magic, older than any of us, and it rarely failed. "I don't have a veil," I said. The masks were one thing, but the ceremonial veils were expensive, passed down through families or purchased specially for the occasion. "They provide them." Iris pointed to a table where white veils were being distributed. "Everyone gets one, regardless of—" She stopped, her expression turning sympathetic. "Your stepmother should have told you that." Of course she should have, just like she should have told me about the masks, about the proper dress, about a dozen other things designed to make me feel unprepared and unwelcome. The horn sounded again, 3 short blasts. The crowd began moving toward the rear doors that opened onto the gardens. The moon had risen, full and impossibly bright, turning the manicured grounds into something ethereal. Iris and I joined the stream of young women heading outside. An elderly wolf stood by the garden entrance, distributing veils with practiced efficiency. When I reached for one, she looked me up and down, her eyes catching on the king's coat still wrapped around my shoulders. "First ceremony?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Her weathered face softened. "Don't be nervous, child. The moon knows what she's doing." She placed a veil in my hands, simple white silk that seemed to glow in the moonlight. "Just be yourself. That's all anyone can ask." The gardens had been transformed. Thousands of tiny lights hung from the trees, mimicking stars. The air smelled of night-blooming jasmine and the sharp green scent of crushed grass. A circular space had been cleared in the center, surrounded by watching wolves, families, elders, the mated pairs who'd come to witness the ceremony. We gathered in the clearing, perhaps 40 women in total. Some I recognized from the village, others must have traveled from neighboring territories. All of us wore the white veils, our faces hidden, our identities obscured. The masks had been removed. This part of the ceremony required anonymity. The males who chose us were supposed to be drawn by instinct, not by prior knowledge or physical beauty. The drums began, slower than before, matching the rhythm of a heartbeat. We started to dance, swaying and turning in patterns that felt ancient, embedded in muscle memory passed down through generations. My wolf stirred, more awake than she'd been in months. She wanted this, wanted to be chosen, to be seen, to matter. I closed my eyes and let the music guide me. For once I wasn't thinking about my stepmother's cruelty, or my worn shoes, or the fact that I didn't belong. I was just moving, just existing in this moment beneath the full moon with the cool grass under my feet and the drums pulsing through my blood. Males began to approach, stepping into the circle one by one. I heard gasps, whispers, the rustle of veils being lifted. Somewhere to my left, a woman laughed, joyful and surprised. A successful pairing. The magic had worked. I kept dancing, though my arms were growing tired. More males entered the circle, more veils were lifted. The crowd of women grew smaller. My stepsisters had both been chosen. I'd seen them leaving the circle with young men I recognized from prominent families. Good matches. My stepmother would be pleased. The music changed, growing softer. Only a handful of us remained dancing now. I felt the weight of watching eyes, the pity radiating from the crowd. The ones who remained unchosen were always pitied, whispered about. Poor things. Not enough. Unworthy. I should have known better. Should have stayed home, kept my head down, accepted my place. This was worse than not coming at all. To be here, dancing alone while everyone watched my rejection play out in real time, I was about to stop, about to remove my own veil and walk away, when I felt it. A presence. Powerful and undeniable, like standing too close to a fire. The air itself seemed to shift, pressing against my skin. My wolf surged to attention, every sense suddenly razor-sharp. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate. The crowd's murmur died completely. Even the drums seemed to soften, as if the musicians were holding their breath. I stopped dancing, stood perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hands settled on the veil. Large, warm, unmistakable. The same hands that had given me the mask, that had helped me dance, that had defended me from my stepmother's fury. The Lichen King lifted my veil slowly, as if savoring the moment. The silk slipped away, and I found myself staring up into those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through me. The bond hit like a physical blow. Not the gentle recognition I'd heard described in stories, but something fierce and overwhelming. It seared through my chest, burning away every doubt, every insecurity, every carefully constructed wall I'd built around my heart. My wolf howled in recognition, in triumph, in something that felt terrifyingly close to joy. Mate. The word echoed through every cell of my body. Mine. His eyes widened fractionally. He felt it too. I could see the recognition, the shock, the way his careful control slipped for just a second before slamming back into place. The crowd erupted. Shocked gasps, excited whispers, my stepmother's strangled sound of disbelief. But I barely heard it. The world had narrowed to just us. Him and me, and this impossible connection thrumming between us like a living thing. "Sarah?" he said quietly. My name in his mouth sounded like a prayer, like a promise. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. The bond was screaming at me to move closer, to touch him, to confirm what every instinct was telling me was real. He seemed to understand. He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, and the contact made the bond surge stronger. I gasped, and his grip tightened, steadying me, anchoring me. "Breathe," he murmured. "I've got you." The ceremony required certain formalities. The Alpha approached, his face carefully neutral, though I could see the speculation in his eyes. He spoke the traditional words, acknowledging the bond, asking if we both accepted what the moon had revealed. "I accept," the king said immediately, his voice carrying across the silent garden. Everyone turned to me, waiting. In that moment, I had a choice. I could refuse. Walk away from this impossibility, return to my safe, miserable life where at least I knew what to expect. Or I could be brave. Just this once. "I accept," I whispered. The crowd exploded into noise. Cheers, shocked exclamations. My stepmother's voice raised in shrill protest before someone quickly silenced her. The king ignored all of it. He was looking at me like I was the only person in the world. "We need to talk," he said, "somewhere private." He led me away from the gardens, back through the hall, which had emptied as everyone rushed outside for the moon ceremony, and into a small side room that looked like a library. Books lined the walls, and a fire crackled in the hearth. He released my hand reluctantly, putting a few feet of distance between us. "You're terrified," he observed. "Wouldn't you be?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "This is insane. You're the king. I'm nobody. There has to be some mistake." "There's no mistake." He said it with absolute certainty. "The bond doesn't lie. But why me? There were dozens of women out there, beautiful, wealthy, connected. I don't care about any of that." "You should." A queen needs to be, I don't know anything about court politics or diplomacy or... I was spiraling, panic clawing up my throat. My stepmother is right. I'm not suitable. I'll embarrass you. The council will never accept... Sarah. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands settling on my shoulders, not restraining, just grounding. Listen to me. I've spent 5 years doing what everyone expected, marrying for politics, choosing based on bloodlines and alliances, and I've been miserable, alone. His jaw tightened. The moon gave me you. Against all odds, against all logic, she chose you for me, and I'm not stupid enough to reject that gift. You don't even know me. I know you're brave. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you walked 3 miles in the rain to attend a ceremony where you had every reason to believe you'd be rejected. His hand slid up to cup my face, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I know that when I look at you, something in me that's been dormant for years wakes up. Tears spilled over, hot and embarrassing. I'm scared. So am I. The admission seemed to cost him something. I'm scared I'll fail you. That the crown and the council and the weight of responsibility will crush whatever this is between us before it has a chance to grow. His forehead dropped to rest against mine. But I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. The bond pulsed between us, warm and insistent. My wolf was practically purring, content in a way I'd never felt before. What happens now? I asked. Now we have choices to make. He pulled back slightly, though his hands remained on my face. The bond is recognized. By law, that makes you my intended mate, but we don't have to complete it immediately. You can return to the capital with me, get to know the court, see if this life is something you can tolerate, or, he hesitated, or you can walk away. I won't force this on you, ever. Walk away? The thought made my chest ache. Is that even possible? I thought once the bond was acknowledged. It's rare. Painful, but possible. His expression was carefully blank. If you truly don't want this, want me, I won't trap you. I studied his face, looking for any sign that he was lying or manipulating. But all I saw was honesty, and beneath that, carefully hidden but unmistakable, hope. He wanted me to stay. This powerful, dangerous, complicated man wanted me. I don't want to walk away, I said softly. But I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I know how to be king. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We'll figure it out together. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of the royal guard entered, his expression apologetic. Your Majesty, the council representatives are requesting an audience. They've heard about the bond and... He glanced at me, his face carefully neutral. They have concerns. Of course they did. The king's mate was supposed to be someone useful. Someone with connections and power, and the right bloodline. Not an orphaned nobody from the outer territories. The king's jaw tightened. Tell them I'll meet with them tomorrow, after we've returned to the capital. They're insisting on tonight, Your Majesty. They're concerned about the delay. I don't care what they're concerned about. His voice dropped to something dangerous. My mate and I are leaving within the hour. They can lodge their complaints then. The guard bowed and retreated quickly. The king turned back to me, his expression softening. Pack whatever you need. You're coming with me tonight. Tonight? My voice squeaked. But my things, send for them later. I'm not leaving you here with your stepmother, not after what I saw. His hands found mine, squeezing gently. Unless you need time, I can arrange for you to stay somewhere safe until you're ready. No. The word came out firm, surprising us both. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it now, before I lose my nerve. He smiled then. Really smiled, for the first time since I'd met him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. Then let's go home, he said. The capital was nothing like I'd imagined. We'd traveled through the night in the king's carriage, an enormous thing with velvet seats and glass windows that somehow stayed warm despite the cold air outside. I'd dozed fitfully against his shoulder, the bond humming contentedly at the contact while my mind spun with anxiety about what waited ahead. Dawn broke as we passed through the city gates. I pressed my face to the window, watching as narrow village roads gave way to wide cobblestone streets lined with shops and houses that grew progressively grander. People were already out, merchants setting up stalls, workers heading to jobs, children running errands. A few looked up as our carriage passed, their eyes widening at the royal insignia before quickly bowing. "It's enormous," I breathed. "Wait until you see the palace." There was something almost apologetic in his tone. He wasn't exaggerating. The palace rose above the city like a small mountain, all white stone and soaring towers, with windows that caught the morning light and threw it back in blinding flashes. Guards stood at attention as we passed through gate after gate, each one more imposing than the last. My stomach churned. This was where I was supposed to live now. This monument to power and wealth and everything I'd never been. The carriage stopped in a courtyard large enough to hold my entire village. Servants materialized immediately, taking our bags, opening doors, bowing and murmuring greetings. The king helped me down, his hand warm and solid around mine. "Your Majesty." A woman approached, older with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and intelligent dark eyes that assessed me in one sweeping glance. "Welcome back. And this must be my mate, Sarah." His hand tightened on mine. "Sarah, this is Margaret, the head of household staff. She runs the palace better than I run the kingdom." Margaret's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "You flatter me, Your Majesty." To me, she said, "Welcome to the palace, Miss Sarah. I've had rooms prepared in the Queen's wing. I'm not—" I caught myself. "Thank you." She nodded briskly. "You must be exhausted from the journey. I'll have breakfast sent up and a bath drawn. His Majesty has council meetings this morning, so you'll have time to rest and orient yourself." The king looked like he wanted to argue, but Margaret fixed him with a look that suggested she'd been managing him since childhood. He sighed. "I'll come find you as soon as I'm free," he promised me. "A few hours at most. I'll be fine." I tried to sound confident. "Go. Do king things." He smiled, but I could see the reluctance in his eyes as he left, flanking guards falling into step behind him. I watched until he disappeared through an archway, then turned to find Margaret studying me with an expression I couldn't read. "This way, miss." She led me through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, all marble floors and painted ceilings and portraits of stern-looking people who were probably previous rulers. We passed other servants, all of whom stopped to bow. Their eyes lingered on me, curious and assessing. The Queen's wing was in the eastern part of the palace. Margaret pushed open a set of double doors, revealing rooms that were larger than the entire house I'd grown up in. "Your sitting room," she announced. "Bedroom through there, bathing chamber beyond that. Dressing room to the left. There's a bell pull if you need anything. Someone will come immediately." I walked slowly into the space, trying to process it. Everything was beautiful. Cream and gold furnishings, thick carpets, fresh flowers in crystal vases. Sunlight streamed through tall windows that overlooked gardens more elaborate than anything I'd seen outside of paintings. "It's too much," I said, without thinking. "You'll get used to it." Margaret's tone was matter of fact. "The staff will bring breakfast shortly, along with appropriate clothing. Your dress from last night is," she paused delicately, "not suitable for the palace." I looked down at myself. The king's coat was gone. He'd needed it back, leaving me in the sad gray-blue dress that was now thoroughly ruined, mud-stained and wrinkled and completely out of place in this pristine room. "I don't have anything else," I admitted. "I left without— Everything happened so fast. That's why we have staff." She moved to the bell pull. "I'll have the seamstresses come this afternoon to take measurements. In the meantime, we'll find something temporary." She studied me with those sharp eyes. "Have you eaten?" "Not since yesterday." She made a disapproving sound. "That won't do. Sit, rest. Food will be here momentarily, and then you'll bathe and sleep. The palace will still be here when you wake." She left before I could thank her, the doors closing with a soft click. I stood in the middle of the opulent sitting room, suddenly and completely alone. The panic I'd been holding at bay crashed over me. What was I doing here? I didn't belong in a place like this, surrounded by servants and luxury and expectations I had no idea how to meet. The bond had felt so certain last night, so right. But in the harsh light of morning, in this overwhelming palace, doubt crept back in. I sank onto one of the sofas, gingerly, afraid I'd somehow damage it, and pressed my hands to my face. My wolf stirred restlessly, unhappy with my distress, but unsure how to help. She wanted our mate. Wanted to go find him and stay close until this feeling of wrongness passed. A knock at the door made me jump. 2 servants entered carrying trays laden with food, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, sliced meat, pastries that smelled like honey and butter. They set everything on a low table, curtsied, and left without a word. I should have been hungry. I was hungry, technically, but my stomach was too tight with nerves to consider eating. I picked at a piece of bread, forcing down a few bites before giving up. The bath helped. The bathing chamber had a tub large enough to swim in, filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender. I soaked until my fingers pruned, letting the heat ease muscles I hadn't realized were tense. Clean clothes had appeared while I bathed. A simple dress in soft green that actually fit reasonably well. Someone had left slippers, too, and a robe in case I was cold. The level of care and attention was overwhelming. I should sleep. Margaret was right. I was exhausted. But my mind wouldn't quiet. Instead, I found myself drawn to the windows, looking out over the palace grounds. The gardens were stunning. Manicured paths wound between flower beds and fountains. In the distance, I could see what looked like a forest, real woods, not the ornamental trees closer to the palace. My wolf perked up at the sight. She wanted to run, to feel earth under our paws, to escape these stone walls even temporarily. Admiring the view, I spun. A man stood in the doorway, younger than the king, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and eyes that held hints of mischief. He wore fine clothes, but carried himself with a casual confidence that suggested he was comfortable in the palace. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "The door was... I didn't mean to..." "Relax. I'm not here to scold you." He grinned. "I'm Tobias, the king's younger brother, though he'd probably prefer I didn't advertise that fact. The king had a brother. Of course he did. Why hadn't I thought to ask about his family? I'm Sarah." "I know. Everyone knows. The entire palace has been buzzing about you since we got word last night." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Mind if I sit? I promise I'm not here to interrogate you. Just curious." I gestured to the sitting area, and he sprawled in an armchair with the ease of someone completely at home. Up close, I could see the family resemblance, the same strong features, though his face was more open, less guarded than his brother's. "So," he said, "you're the one who broke through Caspian's walls. I have to admit, I'm impressed." "Caspian?" "My brother, the king. Did he not tell you his name?" Tobias shook his head, amused. "That sounds like him. All formality and duty. I bet he introduced himself as the Lycan King, like he's reading from a proclamation." He wasn't wrong. I realized with a start that I'd never actually heard the king's given name. He'd asked mine, learned about my life, but I knew almost nothing about him beyond his title. "He's had a rough time of it," Tobias continued, his tone growing more serious. "Our father was, well, Caspian told you he was a bastard. That's putting it mildly. Abusive, cruel, cared more about power than people. When he died and Caspian took the throne, the council expected him to be the same, to rule with an iron fist and make politically advantageous decisions regardless of personal cost. But he's not like that," I said quietly. "No, he's not, which is why the council hates him half the time." Tobias leaned forward, his expression intent. "They've been pressuring him to take a mate for years, someone from a prominent family, someone who'd bring military alliances or territorial advantages. He's refused every suggestion, insisted he'd only mate if the bond was genuine." He smiled. "And then you showed up. I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't cause anything. The bond did." He stood, stretching. "Look, I just wanted to meet you before the council does. They're going to try to intimidate you, make you feel inadequate, like you're not good enough for their perfect political plans." His eyes were kind but serious. "Don't let them. Caspian chose this, chose you. And my brother doesn't make decisions lightly. I don't know how to be a queen, neither did our mother, and she was the best ruler this kingdom ever had. She grew up in a fishing village, caught my father's eye at some regional festival, and ended up ruling beside him despite having no training whatsoever. He headed for the door, then paused. She used to say that caring about people was more important than knowing the right fork to use at dinner. I think she was right. After he left, I felt marginally better. At least I wasn't completely alone here. At least someone thought I had a chance of surviving this. I must have fallen asleep on the sofa because I woke to soft knocking and afternoon light slanting through the windows. Margaret entered with 2 younger women carrying armfuls of fabric. "The seamstresses," she announced, "for your measurements." The next hour was a blur of standing still while women circled me, measuring and pinning and discussing fabrics in terms I didn't understand. They were polite but efficient, treating me like a doll to be dressed rather than a person. I suppose that was their job. "We'll have several dresses ready by tomorrow," the head seamstress said. "Basic items for now. Walking dresses, dinner gowns, morning wear. The formal pieces will take longer." "That's fine," I managed. "Thank you." After they left, Margaret brought tea and small sandwiches. I was actually hungry now, and I ate gratefully while she outlined the schedule. "His Majesty's meetings should conclude within the hour. He's requested you join him for dinner in his private chambers, not the formal dining hall, less overwhelming for your first night." She paused. "The council has requested an audience with you tomorrow morning. You're not required to attend, but it would be advisable." My stomach sank. "What will they ask?" "Your background, your family, your intentions." Her expression softened slightly. "They're not as frightening as they pretend to be. Most of them are old wolves more concerned with tradition than actual governance. Just be honest. Don't try to be something you're not. That's what everyone keeps saying, because it's true." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "You have an hour before dinner. I suggest freshening up. His Majesty's chambers are in the West Wing. I'll have someone escort you when it's time." True to her word, a young servant appeared an hour later to guide me through more winding corridors. We stopped before an ornate door flanked by guards, who nodded respectfully before opening it. Caspian's chambers were surprisingly modest compared to the rest of the palace. The sitting room held comfortable furniture, a large desk covered in papers, bookshelves stuffed with volumes that looked actually read rather than decorative. It felt lived in. Real. He stood by the fireplace, still in formal attire but with his jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, but his expression cleared when he saw me. "Sarah." He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands settling on my waist like he needed to touch me to confirm I was real. "How are you?" "Margaret said you rested?" "I did. And I met your brother. Tobias found you already?" He grimaced. "I'm sorry. He means well, but he has no sense of boundaries. I liked him. He told me your name." "Did he?" A faint smile touched his lips. "I suppose I should have mentioned that. Caspian Thorne, at your service." "Sarah Whitmore," I offered. "Though I guess you already knew that, Whitmore." He said it thoughtfully. "Your father's name?" "Yes." "My mother took it when they mated. Her family wasn't happy about it. He was an outsider, not connected to any prominent bloodlines." I looked away. I think that's part of why my stepmother resents me. I'm a reminder of my mother's poor choice. Your mother's brave choice. His hand came up to cup my face, turning me back to meet his eyes. She chose love over politics. That takes courage. The bond pulsed between us, warm and insistent. He felt closer than he actually was, as if some invisible thread was pulling us together. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I shivered. "Dinner?" he said, though he didn't move. "You should eat. So should you. You look exhausted. Long meetings, council concerns, politics." He stepped back reluctantly, "But they can wait. Tonight, I just want to have dinner with my mate and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist." We ate at a small table by the fire, and for a few hours, that's exactly what we did. We talked about inconsequential things, books we'd read, places we'd seen, Childhood memories. He told me about growing up in the palace, about Tobias's constant mischief, about the woods beyond the gardens where he went when court politics became too suffocating. I told him about the village, about the herbs I sold at market, about the attic room with its leaking ceiling. I didn't mention my stepmother's cruelty. He knew enough about that already. But I shared the small joys I'd found. The satisfaction of a garden growing, the first snowfall each winter, the way sunrise looked from my window. "You're going to miss it," he said quietly. "Your life there. Parts of it," I admitted, "but I don't miss being invisible, being treated like I don't matter." I met his eyes. "You see me, that's new." Then everyone else was blind. He reached across the table, lacing his fingers through mine. "I see you, Sarah, and I'm not letting you become invisible here. I promise." It was a promise he'd be tested on sooner than either of us expected. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. High ceilings that made voices echo. A semicircular table that put me at the center of attention. 12 pairs of eyes watching my every movement. Caspian sat at my right, his presence a solid anchor, but he'd warned me that morning. The council would direct their questions to me, not him. This was my test. Miss Whitmore. The speaker was an older man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Counselor Brennan, Caspian had told me. The most traditional, the most resistant to change. "We've reviewed the circumstances of your bonding to His Majesty. Highly irregular. The moon doesn't concern herself with regularity," I said. My voice shook slightly, but I kept my chin up. A few counselors exchanged glances. Brennan's expression didn't change. "Your background is modest. No political connections, no significant family holdings, no training in court matters or diplomacy." He leaned forward. "Can you explain why you believe yourself qualified to be queen?" The question was designed to make me stumble. To admit I wasn't qualified, wasn't worthy. I felt Caspian tense beside me, but he remained silent. This was mine to answer. "I don't," I said simply. "I'm not qualified. Not yet. But neither was your previous queen, from what I understand. And she's remembered as one of the greatest rulers this kingdom has known." I met Brennan's eyes. "I can't offer you political alliances or military advantages. What I can offer is loyalty to this kingdom and to its people. And I can learn. If you're willing to teach me." Pretty words. Another counselor, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. "But words don't run kingdoms. Your stepmother has sent a petition claiming you used some form of manipulation to ensnare His Majesty. How do you respond?" Anger flashed hot in my chest. Of course my stepmother had. Of course she'd try to poison this before it even began. "The bond cannot be manipulated," Caspian said, his voice hard. "That's not how moon magic works, and you all know it." "We know what we've been told," Brennan said. "But the circumstances are suspicious." A girl with nothing to offer, appearing at a ceremony she was allegedly discouraged from attending, catching the king's attention through unknown means. "She caught my attention," Caspian interrupted, "because she walked 3 miles in the rain to attend a ceremony where she knew she'd be unwelcome. Because she had the courage to show up despite every reason not to. Because when I looked at her, I saw someone real in a room full of people performing." His hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. "The bond chose her. I accepted it. That should be the end of this discussion." "Your Majesty, with respect," Brennan began. "No," Caspian stood, and the room fell silent. "I've listened to your concerns. I've allowed you to question my mate as if she's on trial. But understand this. Sarah is going to be queen, whether you approve or not, whether her background meets your standards or not. The only question is whether you'll support her, or whether you'll spend your energy fighting a battle you've already lost." The silence stretched. Then, surprisingly, the sharp-featured woman spoke. "The king is right. The bond is acknowledged. Fighting it serves no purpose." She turned to me, her expression still calculating but less hostile. "I'm Counselor Vance. I disagree with many of His Majesty's policies, but I respect the old laws. If the moon chose you, I'll accept that. Provisionally." "Provisionally?" Caspian's voice was dangerous. "She needs training. Proper instruction in protocol, politics, diplomacy. She needs to understand what she's taking on." Vance's eyes never left mine. I'm willing to provide that instruction. If she's willing to put in the work. It was an olive branch. Maybe not a warm one, but more than I'd expected. I'm willing, I said. One by one, the other counselors voiced their acceptance. Some grudging, some more genuine. Brennan was the last, his expression sour, but resigned. If she fails, he said, if she proves unable to fulfill her duties, the council reserves the right to revisit this matter. She won't fail. Caspian's certainty was absolute. Meeting adjourned. We left the chamber together, his hand still gripping mine. I didn't realize I was shaking until we were alone in the corridor. I'm sorry, he said. I should have handled that better. Should have shut down Brennan immediately. You let me answer. That was the right choice. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. They need to see I can stand on my own, even if I'm terrified. You were incredible. He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. The way you stood up to them, Sarah. You're stronger than you know. The bond hummed between us, warm and approving. My wolf was pleased. Her mate had defended us, had shown the pack we were worthy. Even if my human mind was still catching up, the next weeks blurred together. Counselor Vance proved to be a demanding but fair instructor, drilling me on kingdom history, territorial politics, the complex web of alliances and feuds that shaped policy. Margaret taught me palace protocol, which servants handled what duties, how to manage a household this large, the unspoken rules that governed court life. Caspian's brother Tobias became an unexpected ally, making me laugh when the pressure got too heavy and explaining the personalities of various nobles I'd need to navigate. He was lighter than his brother, less burdened, but I caught glimpses of the same steel beneath his humor. And Caspian himself was patient beyond measure. He attended my lessons when he could, had dinner with me every night, took me walking in the woods when I grew too overwhelmed by stone walls and expectations. The bond grew stronger daily, deepening from that initial shock of recognition into something more complex. I learned that he hated formal dinners, but loved strategy games, that he still had nightmares about his father, that he read poetry when he couldn't sleep and kept a sketchbook he showed to no one. I learned that being seen, truly seen, was both terrifying and intoxicating. 2 months after my arrival, the palace hosted its first major event, a gathering of territorial leaders to discuss trade agreements. I was expected to attend, to perform, to prove I belonged. I dressed in one of my new gowns, midnight blue silk that the seamstresses had assured me was appropriate. My hair had been styled by servants who knew what they were doing, pinned up with small silver ornaments. I looked like someone else, someone who might actually be a queen. You're going to be fine, Caspian said, adjusting his formal jacket. Just be yourself. What if myself isn't enough? It's more than enough. He kissed my forehead, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. I'll be right beside you the entire time. The great hall was full of wolves from across the kingdom, territorial leaders and their families, wealthy merchants, military commanders. All of them curious about the king's unexpected mate. I felt their eyes on me as we entered, felt the weight of their judgment and speculation. The dinner was elaborate, full of courses and conversations that I navigated with Margaret's training fresh in my mind. I made polite small talk with the territorial leaders seated near me, asking about their regions and listening more than I spoke. Some were friendly. Others were coldly assessing. All of them were watching for mistakes. Halfway through the meal, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A messenger had arrived, muddy and exhausted, dropping to one knee before Caspian. Your Majesty, raiders from beyond the northern border. They've attacked 3 villages. Casualties are significant. The hall erupted in noise. Caspian was on his feet immediately, his expression shifting from courtier to commander in an instant. Gather the guard captains. I want a full report and a response plan within the hour. He turned to me, conflict clear in his face. I have to go, I said firmly. Your people need you. He hesitated, then kissed me quickly before striding from the hall, several territorial leaders and military advisors following. I was left at the table, suddenly alone and uncertain. The dinner continued around me, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations now centered on the raids, on military responses, on things I didn't understand. Quite the dramatic timing, someone said from my left. A woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, with dark hair, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Your first public appearance, and the king abandons you. He didn't abandon me. There's a crisis. There's always a crisis, dear. You'll find that out soon enough. She sipped her wine, watching me over the rim. A queen needs to be able to command a room on her own. Can you do that? It was a challenge. I could walk away, prove her right. Or I could try. I stood, my chair scraping loudly enough to draw attention. The nearby conversations died. I had no idea what I was doing, but Caspian's words echoed in my head. Be yourself. I know many of you have concerns about the northern raids, I said, my voice carrying further than expected in the sudden quiet. And I know His Majesty will do everything in his power to protect our people and respond appropriately. In the meantime, we're here to strengthen the bonds between our territories, to remind ourselves that we're strongest when we stand together. I looked around the room, meeting eyes. So, let's not waste this opportunity. Let's talk about how we can support each other. How we can ensure all our villages, not just the wealthy ones, have the resources they need to thrive. There was a moment of silence, then Councillor Vance raised her glass. Well said, Your Highness. Others followed suit, the title rippling through the room. Your Highness. Not quite queen yet, but acknowledged. Accepted, at least provisionally. The woman who'd challenged me smiled. Genuine this time. Perhaps you'll do after all. The dinner continued, but the tone had shifted. People approached me now, engaging in real conversations rather than polite assessments. I spoke with a territorial leader about irrigation systems for farming villages, with a merchant about fair trade practices, with a military commander's wife about the schools in her region and how they might be improved. By the time Caspian returned hours later, I was exhausted, but oddly exhilarated. He found me in his chambers, still in my formal gown, but with my shoes kicked off and my carefully styled hair coming loose. I heard what you did, he said, closing the door behind him. Taking control of the room, turning a diplomatic dinner into an actual productive conversation. I didn't know what else to do. You were gone, and everyone was watching, and you were perfect. He crossed to me, pulling me up into his arms. Vance said you were more effective in 2 hours than most of the council manages in weeks. She was being generous. She was being honest. Sarah, you're going to be an incredible queen. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, the bond flaring between us like wildfire. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. What about the raids? Under control. We're sending reinforcements and supplies. The raiders will be dealt with. His expression hardened, but it's a reminder that threats are constant. The kingdom has enemies, and they'll see you as a target now. I'm not afraid. I know. That's what terrifies me. He rested his forehead against mine. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Then we'll be careful. Together. The formal mating ceremony happened a month later. A public ritual that bound us not just by the moon's magic, but by kingdom law. I wore white and gold, walked through crowds of cheering people, and pledged myself to Caspian and to the kingdom in words that felt both impossibly heavy and exactly right. My stepmother wasn't invited. My stepsisters sent stiff, obligatory congratulations. I didn't care. The people who mattered were there. Tobias, grinning and wiping suspiciously bright eyes. Margaret, nodding approval. Councillor Vance, watching with something that might have been respect. And Caspian, looking at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. The coronation followed 2 weeks later. I knelt before the kingdom's high priest, while he placed the crown on my head. Light physically, but weighted with centuries of history. When I stood, I was no longer just Sarah Whitmore, orphan and outsider. I was queen. Partner to the king, voice for the voiceless. The girl who'd walked through the rain to a ceremony where she knew she wasn't wanted had become the woman who stood before thousands and swore to serve them. Life as queen wasn't easy. The council still challenged me. Court politics were a maze I was constantly learning to navigate. There were long days and difficult decisions, and moments when I doubted whether I was truly capable of this impossible task. But there were also triumphs. New schools built in outlying villages. Trade agreements that brought prosperity to struggling territories. A network of healers trained and dispersed to provide care for those who'd previously had no access. And there was Caspian, my mate, my partner, my anchor. We argued sometimes. He was stubborn, I was learning to be. But we always came back to each other. The bond had grown from that initial shock into something deeper, more complex. Love, yes, but also friendship, trust. The certainty that whatever came, we'd face it together. A year after the ceremony, I stood in the palace gardens. The same gardens I'd looked at from my window that first overwhelming day. Caspian found me there, as he often did, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Penny for your thoughts, Your Majesty." Just remembering. I leaned back against his chest. A year ago, I thought I was nobody, that the best I could hope for was to be invisible. And now I'm learning that being seen is terrifying and wonderful and worth every moment of fear. I turned in his arms, meeting those amber eyes that had first found me in a crowded hall. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for being brave enough to let yourself be seen." He kissed me softly. "I love you, Sarah. My mate, my queen, my fierce, stubborn, incredible partner." "I love you too." The words still felt new, precious. "Even when you're impossibly controlling and refuse to delegate. I'm working on that." "You're really not." He laughed, the sound I'd grown to treasure most, and pulled me closer. Around us, the palace hummed with life, servants going about their duties, counselors debating in their chambers, Tobias probably causing some benign chaos somewhere, guards protecting borders I'd sworn to defend. All of it overwhelming, all of it impossible, all of it mine. I'd learned that strength didn't mean never being afraid. It meant being terrified and showing up anyway. It meant walking through rain to a ceremony where you knew you'd be rejected, and staying when every instinct screamed to run. It meant accepting love when you'd been taught you didn't deserve it. The moon had chosen me, not despite my fears and flaws, but including them. And I'd chosen her gift, chosen this life, this man, this impossible crown. I'd chosen to be seen, and I'd discovered that I was enough. Not because I'd changed into someone else, but because I'd finally learned to be fully, courageously myself. The girl in the rain had found her place, and she was never going to be invisible again.